Hello, my friends. Thought I'd give you the late night report here. I was enjoying my 35th wedding anniversary yesterday with Annabelle. And now, let me see. And also we had this strange thing happen yesterday. So we were actually having our little 35th anniversary get together. And I get news that my site was hacked and that somebody had broken in. And so and they locked it up and we're posting stuff as me. It's a very strange experience, when you start getting those cyber attacks and they're getting through, your protective walls, but it also shows that we're doing something that must be working. I want you to check out, in particular, what happened today on the Hill, because amongst all the things that are happening, there's a social media backlash that is occurring because clearly the big tech companies were all involved with the election in various ways, suppressing, for instance, the Hunter Biden story. And Ted Cruz, I think, goes after Jack Dorsey. Let me see if I can get this for you. All right, Ted, let's see. What do we got here? Can he give it to us? Well, this is the problem with my late night choices here.
In part,
here we go.
For the creation or development of information.
So he's asking about what exactly is a publisher.
Computer service. Let me ask you, was Twitter being a publisher when it censored the New York Post?
Ooh.
No, we have very clear policies on the conduct we enable on the platform. And if there's a violation, we take an enforcement action, and people choose to commit to those policies and to those terms of service.
Except your policies are applied in a partisan and selective manner. You claim it was hacked materials, and yet you didn't block the distribution of the New York Times story that alleged to talk about President Trump's tax returns, even though a federal statute makes it a crime to distribute someone's tax returns without their consent. You didn't block any of that discussion, did you?
Our policy was focused on distribution of the actual hacked materials.
Did you block the discussion of the president's tax return material?
And in the New York Times case, we interpreted it as reporting about the hacked materials.
Did you block Edward Snowden when he illegally released material?
I don't have the answer to that.
The answer is no.
Ooh.
You haven't used this in a selective manner. Let me ask you, were you being a publisher when you forced Politico, another journalistic outlet, to take down their tweets on a topic that you had deemed impermissible?
No. We were enforcing our policy and our terms of service.
So on October 15th, Jake Sherman, a reporter at Politico, tweeted the following. I tweeted a link to the New York Post story right after it dropped yesterday morning. I immediately reached out to the Biden campaign to see if they had any answer. I wish I'd given the story a closer read before tweeting it. Twitter suspended me. So you actually have a reporter reporting on a story, and Twitter says, "Hi, Jake Sherman, your account at Jake Sherman has been locked for violating Twitter rules." Now, what did the Politico reporter do? Immediately tweets after that, "My goal was not to spread information." Well, that's a little worrisome just in and of itself. "My goal was to raise questions about the story. Oh, my overlords in Silicon Valley, I was attacking the New York Post. You don't understand. I was attacking them." As I did in subsequent tweets, and see how the Biden campaign was going to respond. They later did respond. And then, not long after...
See, what's happening here is that he is going to continue to close in on Jack Dorsey and then go to, what did you do with the Hunter Biden story? Why was that not published? And it really gets a little bit awkward then, because clearly they made a decision as a publisher, I imagine, that they weren't going to allow certain stories to be told, which would not be in their political interest. So, Cruz does an outstanding job of just putting him into a bind here. And what I'm interested in is the fact that Zuckerberg comes on next, and that's a wild one. Oh, I got to show you this one. This is Blumenthal. This guy's a character. Now Connecticut senator, he gets his marching orders from the donors on the left, And so he wants Bannon taken off, and he's interviewing. And while they're going to look at tech overreach, he's going to be, this nut job is going to insist that they eliminate the freedom of speech of Steve Bannon on Facebook. Watch this one.
Senator, as you say, the content in question did violate our policies, and we took it down. Having a content violation does not automatically mean your account gets taken down, and the number of strikes varies depending on the type of offense. So if people are posting terrorist content or child exploitation content, then the first time that they do it, then we will take down their account. For other things, it's multiple. I'd be happy to follow up afterwards. We try not to disclose these.
Down his account.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Will you commit to taking down that account?
He wants them to take it down.
Senator, no, that's not what our policies would suggest that we should do.
Scary.
In this case.
Can you imagine that? Will you commit to taking it down? Taking down Steve Bannon's site. Then the Twitter over there. They block anything that they don't want regarding Hunter Biden. And these things are so, what can I say? They're so symbolic in a sense because they don't have the teeth. It's kind of like a little bit of a ritual hazing, but this is not going to result in the kind of action that is necessary, because you see what the left wants to do. You see Senator Blumenthal. He's not interested in having Silicon Valley be responsible and accountable for content. He's interested in them endorsing the silencing of people that they don't want to hear from. And that is scary. Let's get into the what's happening here. We got a hedge fund statistician who's going to talk about what he came up with on the trail examining the election results.
Steve, thank you for having me. Look, these chalk talks have really taken off. I'm going to continue doing them even though I'm not full-time with the campaign anymore. One of the reasons I know that they're significant is how much howling they're generating from the left. And you know this better than anybody, Steve. When you're getting criticism and when you're getting catcalls from sort of the right people, meaning not meaning right-wing, meaning those on the left who should be upset, it matters because it means you're making a difference. This chalk talk you just played got, I think, about 2 million total views. I'm laying out the statistical case for the numerical improbability of Joe Biden's win. You know, you mentioned some of the qualitative factors of why he can never be our commander-in-chief. Those are really important. But let's also talk about the quantitative factors, the data that suggest that what we have here, if we are to accept it, it was a numerical perfect storm. To use a sports analogy, not only did he get everything right in every exact place where he needed to get it right, but the confluence of them all put together, and I wrote this article for Raheem's excellent publication, National Pulse, and I give 4 points here. This is one of the 4 is turnout. I say when you put all 4 together, the confluence of the 4, it would be similar to use a sports metaphor, pitching a perfect game in the World Series. Okay, that can be done. I believe it's happened one time ever. But it would be like sweeping the series, winning all 4 games to sweep the World Series with perfect games.
They did it in all 4 swing states.
Yes, it is. Is it likely? Hell no. It means we have to take a look. If that were to happen, for example, what would we do? Well, we would start to take a look at the umpires, for example. Was this fair? And so on this first, to get to the numbers, on this first issue of turnout, I laid out the case there for how really there was just a complete void of vetting in the state of Pennsylvania. And by the way, I don't think this was a mistake. This wasn't incompetence. This was by design. Governor Wolf, the reason that he unilaterally, illegally, and unconstitutionally decided to change the election laws of Pennsylvania is that he knew that the system would be so inundated with ballots that there would be no way that we could do a proper vetting. And so what happened? It was 1/30th the level of the vetting of 2001. It was at a dearth of vetting that was set in next door New York. It was 700 times greater. And don't think that this is Pennsylvania only, by the way. I just did yesterday a chalk talk on the same issue for the state of Georgia. Georgia's rejection rate in 2016 was 1%, similar to Pennsylvania. This time it was 3%. I look correctly. It was 3% in Georgia in 2016. This time it was 0.24%. So in other words, it was 1/12 the level of rejection, even though the total number of ballots was 6 times larger this time in the state of Georgia. If we had the same rate of rejection in Georgia this time around in 2020, as we did in 2016, at least 39,000 ballots would have been rejected. And here's the point too, Steve. This doesn't mean that they're just rejected for technical reasons. It can very well be that they're rejected for fundamental reasons, meaning this person's not a valid voter or the signature isn't anywhere close to looking. The point is there was no vetting. The numbers show us this. And given that reality, these votes have to be audited, not recounted. They have to be audited.
Yeah, here's the thing, too. I want to get into both Pennsylvania and Georgia and other places. It's not just, remember, in Pennsylvania, I think it had been 1%, but that was on 260,000 ballots. These are people that were used to making requests for absentee ballots, right? They had done it. They still had that. When you do these things that are 10, 15, 20 times, you're getting marginal voters that have never done this before. They said, oh, well, John Legend did a video and somebody else did a video. I don't want to hear about your videos. That's ridiculous. That can't change behavior. You put up a couple of videos, and they said, "Oh, you don't understand. We put up videos and really got the word out." No, that's ridiculous. Don't give me some absurd answer to this. That's why this is so blatant and so in your face of these illegal, uncertifiable ballots. And remember, if you can't certify this election, right? Trump claims his victory. Let's go to. Can we? Yeah, go ahead.
Quickly
I want you guys to jump in.
I want to add some context here in two ways. Number one, Madeline Peltz and Media Matters are going to come out with a headline later on today that says Steve Bannon says John Legend couldn't impact the election. Right now, before they do that, I want them to consider this. For the last 4 years, we've been told how Steve Bannon and Cambridge Analytica are the dark arts masters, understand everything, World of Warcraft, everything about the thing. So be very careful before you write your headline today, Madeline, about how Steve doesn't know how people operate. And
they're always
what motivates
trailing
them,
him.
right? Because the last 4 years you've told us that he understands everything about everyone.
Psyops.
And that it's Mark Zuckerberg's fault for letting him have the data, etc., etc. But I just want to add into something that Steve Cortez said a minute ago from the data that we're seeing from our team of statisticians, which goes into this in detail. They say in the executive summary for Allegheny County specifically, the facts suggest a mathematically extraordinary event occurring in multiple counties simultaneously at a magnitude well above what is needed to change which candidate won Pennsylvania's electoral votes. The hypothesis therefore suggests, a predictive model hypothesizes, up to 30,500 fraudulent votes in Allegheny County alone, with the model able to expand to other counties with more time. Biden's votes alone are being inflated, and the hypothesis suggests a singular or small set of actors in a position to intercept and modify all precincts data applied a stuffing the Gaussian vote fraud scheme to increase Biden's votes in Democrat-heavy districts that would be undetected by the workers at the precincts, but exceedingly trivial to detect in a Gaussian differential.
Okay, I want to make sure Cortez gets this. What we just broke some news that this group that Raheem's been working with, a statistical group, is putting out their report today. It's a bombshell to watch. We're going to get into more on this as we go through. I want to go. We got the second Chalk Talk.
All right, so watch this.
Cortez. Let's go to that, and then Raheem, Jack, you guys.
He does these like great Chalk Talks, whiteboard chalks. Watch it.
More data on the statistical case against Biden, the statistical improbability of the Biden win, and the serious numerical, not my opinion, numerical anomalies that demand more investigation. Point number 3, Biden-only ballots, meaning people who voted for Joe Biden but then did not vote down ticket, even in places that had hotly contested races. For example, Georgia. But first, let's look nationally. 450,000 Biden-only tickets. That is ballots. That is very, very suspicious.
You got that?
Let's look at the state of Georgia, the difference. President versus Senate. There are 2 Senate races going on in Georgia, so a lot of interest there. Trump, this is the differential. Trump versus the combined Republican Senate vote. The differential is only 818 votes. Absolutely minimal considering he got 2.4 million votes in total in Georgia. In other words, almost everyone who voted for Trump also voted down ticket, voted for the senators. Biden, though, a 95,000 vote differential. There were almost 96,000 people in Georgia, allegedly, who voted Biden only and then did not vote for Senate. That seems far too wide to be believable. And again, the statistical case, the circumstantial case, demands more investigation. Another video coming up.
Now think about that, because what they're saying is that we're looking at 90,000, 40,000 in the Allegheny and Montgomery County, just those 2 counties alone. You have this abnormal turnout, and these 20, 30, 40, 50,000 ballots that come in, I would say in haste, because they froze the news, remember? Nobody knows what's going on. And it's just Biden, 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 Biden. Like, get it done, get it done, get it done, and send it in. And then you find out that that the number of ballots that were rejected was like 0.0003, minuscule, compared to the state of New York, which actually was probably had competing Democrats running, so they wanted to be even more conscientious on excluding ballots. 700% more ballots. That's just right there, and it's because the governor had run through a change that he didn't have the authority to do, but that the state legislator couldn't stop, because the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania was not able to stop it. And so these are the events that have to make their way to the court. Now, the challenge that we've got, and we have to really know what that challenge is that unless these statistical, they call them anomalies, but these the evidence of what is mathematically virtually impossible to see happen, unless that can trigger an audit, we will not see the light of day on victory in these battleground state ripoffs. All over the country, Biden was behind Barack Obama's votes. Barack Obama was like a rock star compared to Joe Biden. There's no enthusiasm for Biden, except in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and in Milwaukee, where they have 90% mysterious turnout. A city with the same demographics is right next door is 55% turnout. But Milwaukee is part of the corruption machine, the Democrat corruption machine in Milwaukee. And this is where they ban me, by the way, on Facebook. And they go, you can't say that. They're going to put little notes up. It's Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Atlanta, and Detroit. These are the places where all of the reports are coming in about the illegality of what's happening. And then the statistics questions. So the challenge is, when you hear about recounts, we got to learn our languages, because the recount, there's two kinds of audits. And one audit is called a process audit. And that's kind of useless, because that's like making sure that, that the computers were used and the ballots were counted. It's not examining the legality of any vote. But if it's going to be a proper audit, then it's a results audit. And that's where you actually verify. You call up or you visit and say, did you actually vote? No, I didn't vote. But their address was used. Their name was used. Or they voted for Trump, but it went to Biden. And so that kind of an audit, the process audit, is what has to happen in Montgomery County, in Allegheny County, in Philadelphia. If that will happen, it will immediately alter that small margin. You got 14,000 here, 10,000 there, Georgia, and then you got 20,000 in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's an anomaly because they have 90%. In Australia, where it's mandatory voting, and you actually get fined if you don't vote. Some countries are like that. They don't have 90%. So what does that mean? It means that clearly there was this beginning from midnight to 5 in the morning where Trump was ahead. Everything froze. The news froze. Everything stopped. And then they started processing and bringing in the differential, meaning that they had to make up the margin for what Trump was ahead. And they knew, because I even put in my book that I predicted, oddly enough, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. I specifically showed you those three states were going to be the factor that the left was going to rip off and that the news would freeze. I wrote it. The news would freeze. Trump's win would be reversed, and you discover the next day that it's an eroding margin and that it would end up having to go to courts. Now, the courts is very difficult because the way that this is set up, you actually have to prove not just that there was statistical anomalies, but you have to be able to prove that there's a certain number of corrupted ballots. And I'm working right now. I'm doing a call. I'll try to get a call into John Solomon tomorrow, because there are some people that are using volunteers now and working with people who are going to verify. But my gosh, they've got only I don't know, 7 people doing it. You and I, our group, we could put together a phone bank and be able to voluntarily do verification process. I get 1,000 of us, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you be willing to do that? To just call and verify, sir, did you vote? Yes, no, and your vote was for Biden? No, it wasn't for Biden, or whatever. But that call into those specific pockets where we know that there was a deception will reveal. Let's say that we can penetrate 5% or 7% of those votes. If we could prove that this is the number of votes that were fraudulent, then you can extrapolate that to what would happen if we did the entire county. This would be the number. It would overturn the result. So there has to be a perpetual awareness on our part that our prayers are going to be for not only for the power of the argument. We're not even talking about the Dominion software now. We're talking about the physical corruption of the voting process and the shenanigans with the origins of these, and the chain of custody is where was it, how did it get to you, and where'd it go? So we're going to look at this, and we're going to come to a conclusion regarding what these numbers actually mean. Let me just give you one more look-see over here. I think this is the one, which might be. Did this one I showed you a moment ago? I don't think so. But this one really impacted me when I looked at it. So let's go over here. And I like his little chalk talks. Give me another one here. Here we go. Talk to me.
Votes. Turnout in Milwaukee was a stunning 84%. It's pretty hard to believe if you put it in comparison with another Midwestern city, similar demographics, similar size, Cleveland. Turnout was only 51%. Are we really to believe that Milwaukee naturally had turnout that much higher than Cleveland? It really strains credibility. It demands further investigation. More coming up.
Steve, this is the thing, is that with a charismatic figure like Obama, right, a historic charismatic figure, they couldn't put up anywhere near these numbers. But then when you just look at the raw turnout, it's a joke. They're trying to steal this in broad daylight, right? They're trying to steal this in broad daylight. And this is why there's no legitimacy to Joe Biden. There's no legality to Joe Biden. And they can whine and throw toys out of the pram and do whatever they want. This is going to be shut down. What you said you could get 40. Walk through, if you had to take it to its logical conclusion, how brutal a case could you make that mathematically this was like almost near impossible?
Oh, listen, to the point where I don't know how anybody could defend the other side. And by the way, this is the only one of the 4 videos I noticed that got a lot of response from corporate media. And what they came back at me with is that my math was wrong on the 90% because they're claiming turnout as a percentage of total adult population of Wisconsin. I'm talking about turnout of registered voters. My numbers are correct. There are 3.6 million registered voters in Wisconsin, 3.3 million turned out. To put that in context, by the way, the country of Australia, voting is mandatory, punishable by fine if you don't do it, and they do enforce it. They only get 92% turnout, okay? So 90% turnout is hard to stomach, and of registered voters, that's up from 82%. Wisconsin's a high turnout state, okay? I'll grant that. But it still went from 82 to 90, which is a significant leap. And in the city of Milwaukee, which is where the entirety of the margin, more than the margin for the state of Wisconsin occurred, 84% turnout. I think if you compare that to Cleveland, as I did in the video, very similar cities, Midwestern cities, very similar demographics. They even look alike, actually, if you've been to the two of them. The idea that Cleveland had a very believable 51% rate and then Milwaukee has 84, again, we cannot believe this case. It's also unbelievable, literally in my view, that this president did better among minorities. You mentioned at the beginning of our talks today that he did better among minorities than any Republican has done in 60 years. And yet we lost this election while adding 10 million total new voters to the America First revolution. The numbers simply don't add up. And I am confident, as I know you are, that we won the legal vote. And it's going to be a twisted road, but this president is going to be sworn in for another term on January 20th.
Cortez,
Wow. So once again, it has to come down to the whether the judges are going to say that there's enough evidence to make up a difference in terms of the totals. But hold on a second here. I'm confident that there's going to be enough controversy about this so that it's going to have to be kicked up another level in the courts, and it's going to have to go somewhere. And it's unfortunate. I'm broadcasting on one of my channels, and it's only half the strength of the other one because of the hack that I've gone through, the hacking, because there's people that are, the media companies are like suppressing what I'm doing, and they're saying, this isn't the facts. And weirdly enough, the Associated Press has already called this. The Associated Press, who gives a rip what the Associated Press does? I mean, the Philadelphia Inquirer could call it. That's actually, the newspapers don't have the authority to call anything. It's got to be the electors. Now, the date for that, the DOS reckoning is December 14th. And I'm sure that, what really frustrates me the most is with this much question about how a ripoff could happen and the amount of evidence you guys are all seeing as I'm seeing, why don't they just redo these votes and just take a couple of counties? Take Allegheny and Montgomery County and say, redo it. We're going to check every ballot out. We're going to investigate these votes. Or, I don't know why you can't just, I know it sounds absurd, but an issue of this importance, I think there should be monitoring and let people have, a couple of days to go maybe do the vote. And if we really had ethical people trying to solve a problem, they go, look, it's just, just let people go ahead and redo it. Or take the time to one at a time verify this person sent it in, especially when you have just Biden on it and nobody else. Like, I like to know, because they're going to have someone who is producing hundreds of these at a time, that they're not going to be able to have hundreds of people that are going to show up and verify that was their vote. So we have this happening right now. And I know that with 70 million involved, that has a devastating effect upon the country. And you see the bizarre Michelle Obama, just get over it. Trump's just not being mature, and he lost. That's it. It's like when you're dealing with the devil, and he just basically says, just submit, give in. And the truth is, no, not when a thief has broken into your house and stolen something. I think what we have to do is we have to make sure that, it's funny because I was on Daystar on the election day, and Marcus Lamb had asked me, do you think Trump's going to win? And I said, I'm not going to say that because I don't want to discourage anybody from going out and voting on the assumption he's going to win. But I will say this is my prediction. It is imperative that the results of this election are not manipulated so as to kill the credibility of the institutions. Because we have to believe. We've already seen how the FBI was setting up Trump and Flynn, and we saw Brennan with his CIA activity with the Russian dossier, knowing it was a Hillary-funded thing. Obama knew it was funded, but they did not expose it as a political campaign tool device. They went and advanced the argument that it was real. And these people, from Facebook to Twitter to all of these, YouTube, didn't ban any of the Russia commentary, even though it ended up being fallacious and unprovable. But they did ban any Hunter Biden information that was coming out. And had that information come out, it would have had an immediate effect on the election, because only 35 or 40% of people actually knew about the hard drive that the FBI had for a year. And why would the FBI have that information? And why would that not be given to Trump? Why would that not be even given to the administration? Well, it's because this is called, when we talk about deep state, it's really the administrative state, and it's made up of career Republicans and majority of the Washington infrastructure, which is democratically aligned, and that does not want Trump around. And to them, it's just like, solving a problem. But to you and me, it's an abortion and the destruction of the very fundamentals of who we are as a nation. Meanwhile, China has just formed its Asian alliance of nations, so that they're all kind of lining up with China over there. It's got its one belt, one road, and you understand how that works. So China's working right now with its, let me get this for you. So China is consolidating this whole region here as an economic bloc, working together. They have all the One Belt, you hear about the One Belt, One Road. It's all the resources here, which will actually encompass 70% of the world's global energy. And now they're buying up the EU, and the EU, with its globalists and its Soroses and its global banking, it wants to work this way to create this new economic alliance. And without Trump there in this economy, there is no resistance because these guys are all part of the globalist community that want to just go back to the way it was. And the way it was our jobs were all shut down, our manufacturing got gutted in order for China to be able to take it. And then Trump said, no, we're going to restore it. And he restored the unemployment. So this is why the unemployment changed. So that Trump basically forced the unemployment to reverse. So it's the lowest of historic African-American, Hispanic unemployment. And by closing off the border so that you don't have free and illegal labor coming in to compete with minorities. It's amazing to me that the black community and the Hispanic community doesn't recognize that the Democratic Party floods this whole border here with people for two reasons. It gives them votes for power, and it pays off their wealthy donors who are interested in cheap labor so they don't have to pay American citizens that much money. If people really understood what's going on, it would make a massive difference. I just think that a lot of our problem is we don't have we're not literate on a lot of this stuff. And I think it's a real mistake. Now, let me see if I can do one more thing for you. I was watching how Christians reason about this stuff. And obviously we have a lot of confusion in the church because I think we had like 30% of the evangelicals, were voting for Biden. Although it's like that's the data, some of the data I saw. I think maybe 25%. And so that all makes a difference because they're under a kind of an influence of anti-Trump, and they don't really understand what in the world Trump has done and what he's accomplished. And he's actually standing against this one world system, and he's fighting for the United States so that we can survive. And you know as well as I do that if we don't have someone like him there, they're going to come they're going to start going after your religious liberties. They're going to come after you in terms of like freedom of speech. They're going to come after your right to protect yourself with arms and the Second Amendment, because that's the nature of the left as a totalitarian state. It is interested in controlling who you are. And so it will do that perpetually. I'll have to locate that and get it for you guys later. But it's just such a fascinating, it's from the Q organization, which has a real grab with millennials, particularly. But I do want you guys to see that. If I can find it, and we will find it. Discerning the chaos is Christianity. We'll review a moment here. Let's see if we can get this. Lord help me. I can never tell.
And so when we say Christianity is not political, we're just showing that we do not understand what Christianity is. And so I think this is a very important starting point.
All right, now listen to this statement.
And that is not to make us this sort of religious, otherworldly spirituality, but to say, no, what is a politic? The Greek word just goes back to the word for polis, which is the word for city. And so politics is the classic art of arranging the affairs of the community. And so politics classically asks questions like, what do we do with our wealth? What do we do with our families? How do we rightfully arrange relationships with enemies? How do we practice reconciliation? Which are the things that Jesus talked about all the time.
Stuff we do in the church every week.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So Jesus doesn't come, for Matthew, for example, Jesus doesn't come saying, repent for a new personal piety is at hand. He says the kingdom of heaven is at hand, which is a politic. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have to reclaim the fact that Christianity is an alternative politic, and as I say in the book, is neither right nor left nor religious. That is, not religious in the sense of otherworldly or pious spirituality, though of course we're trying to rightfully order all things to God. In that sense, it's rightfully a religion. But neither are right nor left, not getting caught up in that continuum and thinking we Christians have to find the right place on the American political spectrum to camp out. That's not our job. Instead, our job is to bear witness to this kingdom of God, which is itself a politic, and which is, as Eugene is pointing us to, one of the most challenging but fundamental realities of the Christian politic is our commitment to nonviolence.
Yes.
And so once you begin with that, then all of a sudden you see the differences between some of the stuff on the right, some of the stuff on the left, and the unfolding of the American experiment.
Okay, so you guys heard that? And it was really, really well put that Christianity is involved with politics because it has to do with how you order your society. What do you do with your money? How do you take care of the poor? How do you reconcile differences? It's all within the realm of the polis. Polis, the Greek word for city. So politics. Now, where's the error? Where do you hear, or these guys, confuse the issue? And this happens all over the new stream in evangelical Christianity, which is naive and misinformed, as intelligent as they sound. Where was the error? Here's the error. And so, when you have the left and you have the right, Christians don't have to choose artificially where do they fit on the continuum, because it's neither left nor right. There's the error. Because you see, on the left, what you have is total government control of your life, shutdowns, speech control. You heard Senator Blumenthal, taking people off the internet whose views they disapprove of. On the right, you have limited government. You have control over government. You have government that isn't expanded. On the left, you're going to have abortion, late term, whenever. On the right, you're going to have life. On the left, you're going to have marriages defined as whatever you want to make it. On the right, you're going to have marriages between a man and a woman. You see, the deception they have there is that they like to make it sound like you don't have to identify with the right. Well, on the left, in the Civil War, you had slavery. That was the Democrats. Over here, you had abolition. So, what are we going to do when we have moral absolutes tied into political platforms? It's too cute to say, they're not going to be right. And then they almost make it sound like a dynamic equivalent. Like, well, there's violence. Christians are not on either side in terms of we're just nonviolent, as though the right is violence. Have you been seeing, did you watch last week, the people trying to support the president going to Washington and then getting savaged by Antifa and Black Lives Matter activists? And you can see image after image. You do not see that coming from the right. You do not see Portland and Seattle and Kenosha with MAGA hat wearing people running around, brutalizing and hurting people or burning down buildings. And so this we know is a fact, but now you ask yourself, why is it that this is never addressed? Why don't they ever call off the attack squads? Why don't they ever disown or even cover the Antifa activity? When we know that it's aligned with the left and it's part of their attack mechanism against the supporters of Donald Trump. There's one reason why, and it's a biblical concept. And this is one that I got, this is interesting. This is one that I got clipped for a statement, but it's the truth. The Bible calls it suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. So what you'll see is that when somebody does not want to see something, the heart does not want to accept it, so it rejects all information that comes into the mind, even when it's irrefutable truth, because it's suppressed, meaning that you suppress the truth in unrighteousness because you don't like the truth that you're seeing. So the heart ends up deceiving the head. Now, how much time does it take before you end up deceiving others? And then what the Bible says is you yourself become deceived and you begin to believe the lie. And this is what Paul described in Thessalonians as being a characteristic of the spirit of Antichrist that would be characteristic in the last days, that individuals will go forth deceiving because they have a narrative they want to believe, whether it's true or not, and then they become deceived by the narrative and believe the lie. And then the Bible makes an interesting judgment that there's 4 times in the Bible where God's judgment is to let you have the lie that you believe. The judgment of God is to turn you over. So one of the dangerous things about sin is that the judgment of God can simply be, he stops fighting with you and he gives you over to what you believe. And then you end up becoming deceived even more fully. So when I described Trump derangement in my first book, and this is we haven't ever really discussed it, there's 3 levels of derangement. And those 3 levels are based on some statistical research I was looking at in organizations where it comes to dealing with belief systems. And the first level is opinion. And an opinion is, well, that's what I think. I hate Trump, he's a racist. Well, really? Well, he's a racist that goes out of his way to try to, break unemployment for the black community. He's a racist that funded $250 million a year for historic black universities. He's a racist who found a way to fund $40 billion into inner city. What the left wasn't burning down, he was actually funding and trying to build infrastructure because he wanted to create great employment in the African American community and Latino community. So he's a lousy racist if he's working that way. But you see, if you want to suppress the truth and unrighteousness, then you will have an opinion that will go into a belief. And it's like, no, a belief is even stronger, because a belief is now you're ordering all the information you're getting, and you're trying to connect the dots in a way that supports your opinion. Now you're actually committed to it as a belief, a mental model. But that's not the highest level of deception. The highest level of deception is to go from an opinion that is based on hearsay or bad information to a belief that is based on a stronger commitment to what your opinion is, to what we would call a conviction. Now, the conviction is what produces the Antifa and Black Lives Matter violence, because they had a conviction that anyone who is marching with an American flag is a Nazi. Now, think how distorted your brain has to be, that a person who loves their nation. Now, this is the thing, and I'm going to say something because I believe Christian nationalism is a hot word that I may not even be able to use it because the way that the devil has stolen the meaning of words. But a nationalist is somebody, as a Christian, is somebody who believes that God is the God of nations, and that God made nations uniquely, and that he made them so that they could reveal his glory. When you go look at the Olympics, every nation has its anthem. It has its song. It has its flag. And in Nigeria, runners are, the Egyptian, wrestlers, or it's going to be the Iranian wrestlers, or it's going to be the Swedes are going to be excelling in skiing. The China can't wait to get all the gold medals it can to try to beat the United States. So when it comes to the Olympics, nobody's an idiot now. Now everybody knows nations are proud of their heritage. They have a unique history. They have a unique story. And the Bible says in the book of Acts that God gave nations and their boundaries, their physical geographic boundaries, and their period of time, that they might seek after him. In the book of Revelations, the nations bring their glory to the Lord, because nations are units of expression of the glory of God. And each nation, kind of like a family member, has their own unique beauty. Every individual is unique. Every nation has its own unique customs, its language, its history. And what you have to catch is this, that the new breed of leftists that wants to destroy America, that hates America, will not allow America to have, it's like having a family, will not allow you to believe anything good about your family. Everything is bad. And think of how psychologically damaging it is if someone takes a child and says, your dad was always a jerk and a loser and hateful, and everything you've got is because he's wicked. And you're still kidding. Kids want to look up to their dad. And every nation has its hero figures and their own mythology about their founders and their presidents. And they're slightly exaggerated, but it's part of the psychological need for identity and to be able to identify with something that is good so that you can aspire to be good. And what you have with the left is this complete theology, really, of destroying America, and it's saying it's a wicked nation, and it's always been a wicked nation, and there's nothing good in your family. It's never done anything good. The fact that it's done more to liberate people globally from slavery and from evil, oddly enough, is omitted. The fact that in showing up in both World War I and World War II, it was the agent of eradicating, and even with communism, to stop the spread of totalitarian communism and the agony that was producing in Europe and around the world. All of that is forgotten because, you see, America can't have any good. Your parents can't have anything good. Your grandparents couldn't have had anything good, because that would legitimize you, and you must be delegitimized and humiliated so that you see nothing good in your nation. What that does is it robs God of his glory. It robs God of his inheritance. It robs them of the inheritance of nations. And Christians better wake up to this because, see, we live in such a dualistic, weird world. I mean, we do. My daughter goes to Reading Bible College, and she graduated, top of her class in a secular college. She wanted to take a year off to go to Bible school. And so she's off there, at Reading, one of my favorite places. However, as I'm looking at Reading and they read a book every week, and I'm thinking these kids are being, trained as being ambassadors of the kingdom. But if everything you're focusing on is going to be otherworldly, supernatural, and you never realize that God is the God of governments, and he's the God of economics, and he's the God of business, and he's the God. My point is that the students need to see that the supernatural also applies in these other areas. And I know that people are teaching that, but you know what? If you don't get the books that are going to also educate you, like Andrew Breitbart's Righteous Indignation, if you don't get a hold of the stories about the battle in American culture, so you understand how the devil and the demonic is working in the infrastructure of media and law and journalism and corporate business, which are funding, by the way, they're funding these organizations that are the anarchist organizations, because part of it is because they're paying off protection money, so that you never see Nike, you never see Amazon, you never see Apple attacked. It's always small businesses being destroyed. So it's kind of like, in one sense, it's like paying off, peace. On the other hand, these are globalists, the multimillionaires and billionaires that are funding this stuff, that are behind it. They're happy to see, Trump and your America come down, because they are citizens of a global community. They're not that hot on America themselves, and they got their house over there in Europe. And besides that, all of the decline in America, all the decline in manufacturing, all the decline in employment doesn't touch them, because they're insulated in their wealth. So they're not moved by the decay of America. So it's a very cynical realization you have when you discover that a whole party is dedicated to the proposition that it must control the country rather than freedom, and that it must tear down the country rather than build it up in order to expand its base of power. And stealing this election is a particular finger in the eye, because I believe statistically it'll end up, if we could do this properly, we're going to find out that Trump actually expanded his base by 10 million people. Biden didn't expand. He didn't expand it beyond Barack Obama. He didn't have the sex appeal and charisma of Barack Obama. He was hiding out in the base for the whole time. So that was a fraudulent expansion. I think that the majority of Americans, certainly the majority of Americans in the middle class, are not interested in having the flags burned and every sporting event become a political protest moment manifestation that they have to submit to. And they voted in a rejection of that worldview, and their rejection was overruled by the corruption and the strong will of the organized machinery of the left, that now is saying, shut up, sit down, and accept this, because the media is in that third level that I talked about. It's gone beyond opinion into belief. They have become the mouthpieces of false prophecy, the prophets of Baal, so that they themselves actually have a conviction that Trump is dangerous and Trump is bad and Trump is racist and blah, blah, blah. And by the way, you who would vote for him are in the same kettle of fish, which is why you don't want them in office having power over your internet, over your freedom of speech, because they're not going to be content to stop there. They're going to come for your right to protect yourself. They're going to come for your churches, as they've already done, and they're using COVID in order to reinforce that. And they're going to ultimately come for your assets, your homes, and your property, because that's what socialism and communism has to have. It has to level the playing field so that you don't own anything. You're totally dependent on government, and therefore you're totally submitted to government. And these are the things that I want to see in our Bible colleges understood, so that when you have 700 students that are coming, or 500 from other nations, they have to understand that there is a political warfare. There is an idea warfare over their sovereign nation, and that those nations are all right now experiencing a global economic reset. This is what Davos wants to do. I just heard it in Canada. Trudeau, that is a nut job. They want to shut down their nations, and they want to reset the global economy, because in their thinking, they're going to make the world more equitable and just by taking from people and redistributing it, so that instead of like Jesus saying, you got 10 talents, you got 5 talents, you got 1, they're going to wipe out Jesus' system and say everyone's going to get 1, except for them. they get all the marbles because the elites don't live in the same world you do. And I predict it's going to form a backlash. I think it's already a backlash happening. But I do believe that there's a redemptive way that backlash works, and that's going to be the rise of nations, and that you're going to see Christians now are being. I believe what we're in is like the chaos code. We're in the period of chaos, where rulers have risen up. The house of God is awakening. It's the house of God awakening, and then the O is the occupying territory. Now we're realizing we have to actually occupy so that we can have sovereign nations that aren't assimilated into global empire. This isn't the hour for the beast to take over your life. But whatever ground you give the devil, he's going to take. And right now, he's overreaching. He's reaching, I believe, illegally into what was not given to him. And the information warfare that we're under is what happens when the high places are under the control of these spirits. And like I teach these mountains, that at the top of those mountains are the influence structures. And those influence structures over media and over entertainment, if they are not occupied by believers, if there aren't people that are pushing back against the propaganda, then the propaganda will end up redefining reality itself, and it will have the power of Babylon, which is the power to name things. That means, what is a man? What is a woman? Well, it's subjective. It's psychological. It's not biological. That's according to the new power to name things, and it goes on and on and on from there. So we are continuing to pray, and we're heading into, oddly enough, we're coming into. I know people have already talked about the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower Covenant, but the truth is, it's today's the 18th. It's November 21st. Everybody celebrated it like a week ago for the Mayflower Covenant. They did reenactments, they blew shofars, and it's kind of like I look at the New Year. You got Rosh Hashanah, the Jews do it, in like September, and then the Gentiles hit it again in January. The truth is, we're coming up on November 21st to the actual date of the Mayflower, and the reason the date's different is because we have a difference between the Julian calendar and the calendar that was used that miscalculated it. So November 21st is the 400th anniversary, and what I want you to know is, very powerful thought the Lord was giving me the other night when I was praying about the roots of our nation, that in the Mayflower you had some 100 of the people that came over were simply seeking freedom to worship God. They weren't looking for, as in other landings, just money or wealth or opportunity. They wanted to worship God. Their first winter was so severe that though they had made it across the Atlantic, when they had disembarked, the winter was so severe, and the difficulty they had for food and for dealing with illness was such that there was some 70 to 80 or so of the original people actually died. They were buried. What I saw was that there was seed that was planted in America, that these people longed for freedom and longed for God, and they wanted to get away from the persecution they were experiencing in Europe. And when they came here, they were planted in the ground as the first fruits for freedom. And they gave their life and were buried in the soil as seeds in order that there would be, if you might say, that what they paid the price for, another generation could experience. And so I am praying now, thanking God for the United States of America and these pilgrims that came and knelt and put a cross up and prayed that they would be able to see whatever that land was, how as far as it went, they didn't know, but it would be for the glory of God. And they were looking for a Christian culture. And I believe that that's also part of the American story. And I'm asking the Lord to remember the covenant and the covenant roots, to remember this president and how he stood with Israel, to remember Israel, and that those that stand with Israel, and those that, and a man like that, Trump, who stood with the church, Christians, and stood against global persecution of Christians and Jews, and lectured the United Nations on that I believe that he was standing in a place of honoring God, and he was doing it because it's part of his worldview. It's part of the way he sees things. And I believe that the Lord honors those that honor him, and that the Lord lightly esteems those that do not. And I'm asking the Lord, again, for ferocious mercy for the United States of America. Not just 4 years of mercy where the president is is impeached, harassed, and humiliated, and where our own institutions, from the FBI to the Justice Department, the CIA, were actually playing games and harassing and attacking and trying to take him out of office the entire time. And then to have a theft of his own reelection when he actually had more votes than he ever had before. I believe that we haven't seen justice in those 4 years, and that God's mercy is greater than that. And I'm asking the Lord to stand with, for his own namesake, for his own reputation, that he will stand with those that stand with him, and that he will consider what will the nation say, what will the heathen say, that a man who stood so conspicuously with God and for Israel should be so unceremoniously beaten and defeated by theft and pure brute will to power. And may that not be, may that not happen. For the word of the Lord says that unless God's judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will not learn righteousness. That there still needs to be, before Jesus returns, the revelation that the kingdom of God is real, and that God does answer the prayers of his people, and that those that honor him, he will honor, and that those who bless his people, he will bless, and that God is a God that judges in the earth and not just in eternity, and that he is a real ruler of nations right now, and that he is even now moving by his Spirit. We must understand the nature of almost the impossibility of the task of reversing this election. Those of you that if the more that you know about the challenge that is there in these states to be able to prove that election, that the votes were wrong, unless you can actually see the votes, you can't do that. So the argument has to be made that there's fraud. And if it's just arguments without proof, then the will of man makes it easier to just move on. Believe me, there's a lot of pressure in these natural minds to just move on, because to them it's another 4 years. They don't have the apocalyptic sense that you and I have regarding the timing and the fragile nature of the world right now and what America represents, what Trump represents for the global order. And I'm praying in the name of Jesus that God will honor his name, his reputation, and that 4 years is not enough, that there must also be the sweeping of justice. There must be the revealing of God, that God is not a God who is ignorant or disengaged from the affairs of man, but that he himself will step down, that he will step down. And I shared with you in the last broadcast I had of a young prophet, and Rick Joyner sent me his name. If you want me to, I'll interview him. And it was on Sid Roth's show. And he had this encounter with the Lord, and he saw the feet of Jesus going down a staircase. And I was thinking, because the name of the software just came out that day when I was hearing this, and it's Dominion. And Dominion refers to it refers to the hierarchy of the spirit realm, from angels, archangels, principalities, powers, and rulers in darkness. But over them is God, and over them is Jesus. And the fact that this prophet saw Jesus' feet stepping down makes me believe that the Lord himself is coming down to judge the situation. And because God does hear the prayers of so many of you, that Jesus is stepping down, because Jesus is Lord of this nation. This nation does not belong to the devil. This nation does not belong to the willful powers that are resisting him. And I'm looking for my Bible now, but I got the verse memorized. But I got more. I get convicted sometimes. I got so many Bibles. I should read as many Bibles as I've got. But I think it's the Passion Translation. If you ever look at Psalm 2, and we'll close off here, that I believe the Lord, these are the arguments in the Spirit that I'm advancing as I pray. And, as Jewish people did, Abraham with God and Moses with God. Moses was the one that advanced the argument that, Lord, what will the heathen say if this is successful and the prayers of your people cannot prevail? But Psalm 2 is the psalm that comes to my mind. Why do the heathen rage? And why are there people that imagine a vain thing? For the kings of the earth set themselves, and those rulers have taken counsel together, and they've taken it against the Lord and his anointed. And the Lord anointed Donald Trump as a Cyrus, and he's proven over and over again with his march for life, with his stand for Christianity, with his stand for Israel, with his desire to see America great, so that America could be strong, so that America could be able, in a sense, to hold the world order of just nations in tension. And they said, but we're going to break his bands asunder, and we're going to cast his cords away from us. We're rejecting the Lord, and we're rejecting his anointed. But he that sits in the heavens shall laugh. I remember when we were in Washington, we were doing a prophetic song, and one of the stanzas was, he that sits in the heavens shall laugh. He that sits in the heavens shall laugh. I wasn't even sure what that was all about, but now I see it. The Lord shall have them in derision. He will speak unto them in his wrath and vex them in his sore displeasure. Yet I have set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. The Lord determines rulers, and the Lord determines particularly when his people are praying and obeying. The Lord determines who the ruler is. The rulers don't set themselves. The Lord gets to make that decision. I will declare the decree, the Lord said. And then, thou art my son, this day I have begotten thee. Oh, suddenly we go into another mode here. What is that talking about? This is the verses quoted by the apostles for the resurrection. Psalm 2 is about the resurrection of Jesus. The rulers of the earth rejected him. They beat him. They mocked him. They scourged him. And for 3 days there was a contradiction. And could be for 3 weeks we have this contradiction. But I believe that contradiction says, but today, this day, I have begotten thee. This is when the Father brought Jesus out of the grave. Remember, Jesus didn't come out of the grave of his own. He couldn't. Because the Father, he said, Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. For him to be raised from the dead, the Father would have to do it. He could not raise himself because he died as you, not as him. Remember that. Christ died as you. He died for you. You don't have the power to pull yourself out of the grave. God does that. And so Jesus had to take your place. And the Father on the third day declared the decree. I've begotten you from the dead. Boom, raised by the Father. First thing the Father says, ask of me, and I'll give you the heathen for your inheritance and the uttermost parts of the earth for your possession. Uttermost parts of the earth refers to all the geography. Heathen refers to all of the nations. The other translation says, ask of me and I'll give you the nations for your inheritance, because the two are interchangeable. It's interesting. Why is Jesus told to ask for nations? Because he never did. He never asked for nations. Do you know what he asked for? You. Father, I don't pray for the world. I pray for those whom thou hast given me. For all mine are thine, and thine are mine, and I am glorified in them. Father, I pray not for the world, but for those whom you've given me. And so the Father now says, ask. I'm giving you nations. I'm giving you nations. And you shall break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Well, that's not going to go over so good with all of our loving Christians. But when Jesus comes back, he is going to rule the nations, and he comes back with angels of flaming fire, taking vengeance on all those that do not obey God. So it's Jesus the judge returning. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings, be instructed, ye judges, and serve the Lord with fear. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and ye perish in the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust. This refers to the second coming. It's amazing how when Jesus came the first time, they were looking for the warrior, and he came as a lamb. Now we're all obsessed with Jesus the Lamb, and he's coming back as a warrior. Another reason why I'm asking the Lord to come down and judge the situation, because the great shaking of nations is Jesus reshaking and reshaping the nations based on whether or not the nations and the church in those nations is aligned with him. And I believe we're aligned with him. Aren't you aligned with him? Aren't you praying right now? Okay, well, tell you what I want you to do. If you're watching this right now, just make sure you like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, because I keep forgetting to tell people that, and I'm always worried about getting bounced off the internet, because now that I'm getting hacked, I'm getting these warnings all the time. And so you can go to lancewallnau.com, and that's where I have my last 11 prophecies about Trump and his era of history. And I don't believe that period of history is over yet. But it was 11 prophecies about Trump, and you can go to lancewallnau.com. And the reason I want you to do that is because you put your email address there, and if I get bounced off, disconnected, hacked, or shut down, I can still get in touch with you with an email and let you know where I'm at, because we're just negotiating today to go on other channels and media and television. And I have to tell you that it's a battle doing that too, because Christian channels don't want what I'm saying, and secular channels think I'm too much about Jesus. So I'm having kind of like the Twilight Zone between two worlds, But that's our world. It's the world where the world belongs to Jesus, and it's the gospel of the kingdom. Does that make sense to you? So the book, I'm encouraging you guys to grab the book, because where we are now is in the shaking part, the shaking chapters, where we're going to have to pray the prayers that have to do with the shifting and the shaking. And the shaking is increasing, as you can see it. The global reset economically that they're looking for, with Trump in office, we can have an economic recovery. With Trump not in office, I believe what you're going to see is everything that he brought as a blessing, the enemy intends to reverse. And that economy that he gave is the blessing of God. And I don't believe that the Lord is coming down that staircase in order to agree with his enemies. So we are standing in agreement with the Lord that he is going to honor his name. He is going to grant to us an extension of grace and of peace. And you know the left will have an absolute meltdown if they don't get what they want. They'll never, because the brain, like I said, they can't see the truth anyway. So many of them, because they are suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. But I believe that there's a way forward in all of this. And at a minimum, I know that all of this is working out so that as kingdoms are colliding right now, as I wrote about on page 49, that we're praying, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth. That's not just when Jesus returns the second time. That's right now. We want to see the kingdom come, the will of God be done. And I'm praying that all of our youth and all of our Bible schools and all of our millennial ministries are going to start to fortify a worldview into our young men and women that they could take to their nations, that is going to be for freedom of enterprise and not socialism. They're all being seduced into this socialism because it sounds so generous. But in fact, socialism is when somebody else makes the choices for you that God gave you the freedom to choose. And somebody else will limit your destiny based on what they think you should do because you aren't qualified to pursue your own. And I'm praying for all of our youth that they'll have a vision of the supernatural, but the supernatural invading the natural, and not just in evangelism and healings and words of knowledge, but actually in going to journalism and law, and going into politics and government and economics, and going into theater and art and filmmaking, and going into business and creating wealth, creating jobs, and creating innovative ideas, and medicine and technology. And there's so many ways in which the supernatural wants to go, and to have the courage to resist the devil, to push back on evil, to have strong opinions, and to graciously defend the worldview that actually is the worldview that is more just and more humane and more free than the worldview that you're looking at now. By the way, curious data says that I think it's some 40% of Democrats that were polled actually believe that violence is a political tool to use against those that they disagree with. That's a scary statistic, but it comes about when you don't have the gospel. And increasingly, there's a percentage like 15 to 20%, I think, of Republicans that find that that violence is a justifiable way of responding to that violence. Now, for the Christian, we are a people that were taught to turn the other cheek, and because we understand that these are spiritual forces, and we have the evidence of people like the Apostle Paul and others who, while raging enemies, have been converted. And so we always hold out that place of tolerance and love. And it's another reason why we have to fight in every other way that we're called to, with courage and boldness and showing up and do what we got to do, because we have to think. I think about this often. I do not want my children and the next generation a place where they will be violently treated by their enemies because the enemy sees them as their enemy. And in order to change that, we're going to have to courageously remove the terrorists from the cockpit, and understand that that this is going to be, this Reformation battle that we're in, this awakening that we're praying for, is going to involve us having to deliverer, and deliverance is the kingdom of God. Remember, if I by the finger of God cast out devils, the kingdom of God has come. When thy kingdom comes, it casts out devils. And devils can be in systems. Devils can be in media. Devils can be in, in finance. And devils can be in a drug cartel. So we're going to have to see deliverance to the institutions in the high places. We're going to have to go in and do the reformer's job. Does that make sense? All right. God bless you. We'll be talking more. Be encouraged, because as I've been saying all along, this battle is like Daniel 21 days of warfare in the heavenlies. And I believe that Michael and his angels, which are the Israel division, I believe that the angels that are fighting here, that because of the covenant roots that we have with Israel, the blessing of God, there's a bit of a mystery, but this is when Daniel prayed, and he was stuck in the 21 days of battle. It was Michael that came and helped Gabriel, and Gabriel was able to bring revelation to Daniel. And the moment that revelation broke out, it's a mystery, but it authorized a shift in the circumstances. And curiously enough, out of those circumstances came Cyrus. And Cyrus came to power. And Cyrus released God's people to build the house God wanted. And we're living in the era now where God is raising up leaders for the sake of the church, and the church better wake up and begin to do what that leader can't do, which is build the house and occupy the culture and be a front line and not just a nervous, praying critic on the side, but engage. And I think we're going there right now, don't you? I feel like that's where we're going. All right, I love you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for joining me on this broadcast. And we could stay connected together. If you subscribe, you're going to be updated on the next broadcast that comes out. And you could like this right here, and we could actually start to create a movement of connected people.